With the first place in the NFC West up for grabs, could the Seahawks be the healthiest they've been since the start of the season against the Cardinals on Sunday? We'll be breaking it all down, taking a look at the latest injury report here on our Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, the host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be teaming up here on Blue Friday with my co-host, Nick Lee, and a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. And thank you for being patient with us today. And hopefully, we're keeping our fingers crossed that these bomb cyclones will stop hitting us so that we have an opportunity to get through this entire show. It's certainly been interesting with power and internet in the Pacific Northwest. But as always, we appreciate making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. First place on the line at Lumen Field on Sunday. The Seahawks hosting the first place Arizona Cardinals with a chance to jump in front of them in the division standings. We'll be taking a look at some keys to victory, game planning a victory for the Seahawks on offense and defense. And we've got our picks to click and game predictions and much more brought your way by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedInNFL and use the code all lowercase LockedInNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Now for your lead story here on our Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. It's week 12, but if you looked at the Seahawks injury report, you might think that it's week 1 or week 2, and that's a good thing in this instance. The Seahawks only having 3 players on their Friday final injury report. The only one ruled out, Brady Russell, the backup tight end special teamer, will miss a second straight game with a foot injury. But, Nick, the really good news here, Noah Fant, after missing the last 2 games with a groin injury, also had the bye week mixed in there as well. Probably would have missed 3 games if not for that bye week. He's listed as questionable, and he was limited at practice on Thursday. He was a full participant on Friday. So he seems to be trending towards playing. Mike Macdonald wouldn't guarantee that today, but he was optimistic about Noah Fant's status. And even Laviska Shenault, who exited Sunday's win over the 49ers with an oblique injury, he's also listed as questionable. And he was a full participant in Friday's practice. D. Williams isn't even on the injury report after being carted off on Sunday with an ankle injury. You look at this injury report, Abe Lucas isn't on there at all. Leonard Williams isn't on there at all. This might be the best injury report that we have seen for the Seahawks all season going into the biggest game they've played up to this point.
Yeah, I think that they're healthier right now than they were to start the season, it kind of seems like. Because we were talking about how there's a, they started getting lengthy in weeks 2 and 3. Like, man, it's only going to get worse from here. But here we are in week 12, week before Thanksgiving. And here we are with the Seahawks having, a shorter injury list than my senior year essay. I mean, it's pretty nice. So the positive ones, obviously, Abe Lucas and Leonard Williams, like you mentioned, without designations, and D. Williams. But for me, I'm going to focus on Abe Lucas coming back and perhaps being. I think Mike Macdonald has hinted throughout the week that they expect a heavier workload for Abe Lucas at right tackle, even maybe the whole game. I know he was 42-18 in the snaps with Mike Jarrell there. Him playing a whole, a game's worth of snaps would be really nice. And man, to have them at full health on the offensive line, or as much as they can be with them having to scramble last week with the retirement of Connor Williams. But Abe Lucas coming back and now looking to be, obviously there's some conditioning, and I think he kind of laughed at that at the end of the game. Where there's some conditioning things going on as far as, game shape, but as far as health wise, he seems like he's as good as he's been in a long time. So, and even Rayshawn Jenkins, who we've been missing. And, although I don't know how much, because Kobe Bryant's been playing pretty well in his absence, but even getting Rayshawn Jenkins back. And, really, this is a game where you can take control of your destiny in the NFC West. You got to have all your horses in the stable. And right now, the Seahawks stable is almost busting that it's so full of their horses ready to go.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed out Rayshawn Jenkins. We talked about him earlier this week, and I know there's some fans that are skeptical about whether or not he should be activated. I am not in that camp. I think that Rayshawn Jenkins can absolutely help this football team down the stretch. I think he's a good football player who was struggling to tackle because he had to cast a club on his hand for a couple of games, and that is going to be fixed now. He's not going to have to worry about that. So I think that Rayshawn Jenkins coming back as a situational third safety, particularly in this game, we'll talk more about this next segment, why this could be a valuable addition to their defense. But having him back, I think, is a good thing. On the same token, I'm not benching Kobe Bryant. I'm not taking him out of the starting lineup with the way that he has played as of late. So fully expecting Rayshawn Jenkins will be dressing for this game, will be activated to the 53 by tomorrow afternoon. We'll see who the practice squad call-ups are going to be. It may be Tyler Mabry coming back up as a tight end. They might try to bring up another linebacker like a Patrick O'Connell. Who knows what the game plan is going to be. But ultimately, this is a pretty darn healthy-looking football team. I'd be surprised if Noah Fant's not playing. It is a soft tissue injury, so you always have to be kind of guarded because it can take just the smallest of movements and suddenly, my groin's flared up again. So you're hoping that this injury is behind him and he is ready to go. Laviska Shenault in the kick return game, you're hoping to have him back as well. Kenny McIntosh would replace him if he isn't able to go. But this is as clean of a bill of health as we've seen from the Seahawks. Obviously, Brady Russell is a key special teams player, but if that's the only guy that you've got out and you're going to have Abe Lucas, I know a lot of our listeners were mentioning yesterday during our crossover that they were concerned about the fact that Abe Lucas didn't practice on Thursday. I have a feeling, Nick, this is how this is going to be, at least for the first couple of weeks that he's back. They are going to be very cautious with him because Mike Macdonald said he was sore coming out of the game. He's not fully in game shape yet. So we'll see how many reps he ends up getting on Sunday. I expect we're still going to see some Mike Jarrell against the Cardinals, maybe not quite as much, but it's still going to be a little bit of a rotation is what I'm anticipating. And then you're probably going to see the Seahawks one practice a week, either limit or sit out completely Abe Lucas and make sure that he's ready to go. Look, my viewpoint, I'll keep him in bubble wrap all dang week as long as I can keep him playing on Sunday with the way that he played against the 49ers. And I think he's just going to grow stronger as he gets deeper into the season and he's got more snaps under his belt, more practices under his belt. I mean, he had 3 weeks of practice and barely did full participants during that time, Nick. So this is going to be something that I'm really excited about seeing him out there. Leonard Williams, it's week 12. Veterans, they're going to do this with. Your foot's bugging you a little bit. Let's sit you a couple of days. But he was a full participant on Friday as well. He missed practice time last week and played really well against the 49ers. He's played so much football. I'm sure he can just crawl out of bed and go out there and play against the Cardinals this weekend at a high level. So honestly, this is the best injury report that we've seen. And that puts, I don't want to say puts pressure on the Seahawks, but look, I know Arizona's come off the bye week, but Arizona's got more injuries coming out of the bye week they're dealing with than what the Seahawks have right now.
Yeah, it's funny. It's amazing what one win can do, Corbin, with beating the 49ers and kind of reversing momentum and saving the season. We've heard that a few times this week from outlets that the Seahawks saved their season. And all of a sudden, the Seahawks are getting healthy. They're coming off a win at San Francisco. And you know, the 49ers are reeling right now. They might not even have Brock Purdy on Sunday. The Seahawks beat that team up pretty good physically last Sunday. So, where are the 49ers? So you kind of can see this little bit of a shift in the momentum in the NFC West. And I think, well, obviously this game will decide, where the momentum truly lies. Is it in Arizona or up here in the Pacific Northwest?
Think this is going to be a really fun game and looking forward to diving deeper into game planning, picks to click, and all of our favorite Blue Friday programming here. When we come back, we're going to be looking at offense and defense, what the Seahawks need to accomplish to jump back into first place. Because if they beat the Cardinals on Sunday, that's exactly going to be the case. They will be the first place team in the NFC West with 6 games left to play. We'll get to that up next here on our Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Locked On Seahawks is sponsored by BetterHelp. What's the first thing you do if you had an extra hour in your day? For me, especially this time of year, I wish I had a bit more time for lifting weights and working out during the regular season. The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so you can do more of it. And BetterHelp Online Therapy helps assess your needs. It can match you with your own licensed professional therapist in less than 48 hours. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient. It's flexible, and it's suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire, get matched with a licensed therapist, and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Get 10% off your first month at BetterHelp.com/lockedon. That's 10% off your first month of online therapy at BetterHelp.com/lockedon. This episode's also brought your way by our friends at Game Time. You shouldn't have to think about skipping a mortgage payment when you want to buy tickets to your next big sporting event, concert, or comedy show. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes that guesswork out of buying tickets. Do you want to see the Seahawks at home on Sunday against the Cardinals, even a couple days before kickoff? You can get seats in the lower bowl for under $125. Great seats to watch the Seahawks hopefully pull back first place in the NFC West as they battle the Cardinals. Game Time has deals on tickets right at the day of the event, and the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price to write your own memories. If you find tickets in your own or the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Welcome back to the Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined as always on our Blue Friday show by my co-host, Nick Lee. And a special thanks to all the 12s who are listening in. Thanks as always for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. The Seahawks going to be gunning for first place in the NFC West when the Cardinals come to town on Sunday. And there's a lot on the line here, Nick, not just playoff ramifications. There's some pride here for the Seahawks. You haven't won in 4 straight home games at Lumen Field. You want to figure out how to get off of that skid. So this is a huge game on a number of fronts for the Seahawks. And if they win, they're in first place in the NFC West. And 2 weeks ago, who would have thought that that was something they were going to that quickly be able to have a chance to re-seize? But that's where we are at right now going into week 12. For the Seahawks to make that happen, however, this is a Cardinals team that's won 4 straight. They've been as hot as anybody. Let's break down our game plans for a Seahawks victory. We'll start on the offensive side of the football. Nick, when you look at this game, Arizona's defense has really been a bend but don't break type defense. They've given up a lot of yards, but they've been really darn good at keeping teams out of the end zone. Going into this matchup, what do you foresee the Seahawks needing to do to be able to get this win at home against an upstart Cardinals squad?
Well, the Cardinals have allowed 15 points total in the last 2 games, granted against the Jets and the Bears. You'd like to think that Ryan Grubb's squad will be a little more up to the task on offense for the Seahawks. So 2 things that kind of stuck out to me. First off, I like to, my weekly find the rat on the defense. Where can be a soft spot for the defense of the Cardinals? Because you're White, the linebacker for Arizona, really struggles in coverage. In fact, by Pro Football Focus standard, he's one of the worst coverage linebackers in the NFL. Now, Jackson Smith-Njigba, I don't know if you've heard, is one of the hottest receivers in the entire NFL. In fact, if I have this right, he's got the most receiving yards by anyone not named Jamar Chase and Jerry Jeudy in the last 2 or 3 games. So really, really been on an absolute hot streak. But then also you're talking about returning perhaps Noah Fant, get him involved in the middle of the passing game, and get running backs out involved, Walker and Charbonnet, kind of just attacking the linebackers in the passing game, the soft underbelly, because there will be some chances there. They do struggle to kind of cover sideline to sideline. And now the Seahawks have one of the talks of the town, and Jackson Smith-Njigba as one of the rising stars as far as receivers go. And, you'd like to utilize him as best you can to keep that heater going. I mean, that relationship with him and Geno Smith and him in that offense with Ryan Grubb seems to be blossoming more and more by the week. Why not use perhaps maybe not your most potent strength, but certainly your hottest commodity right now in Jackson Smith-Njigba, your middle passing game, your slot game against the soft underbelly of the passing defense for the Cardinals. So that was one note for me. And then another thing I found is the Cardinals are, it's about sustaining drives. The Cardinals are 0-4 when allowing 23 or more first downs, and 6-0 when their opponent gets less than 23 first downs. So you got to get to sustaining drives. They're 31st in yards allowed per drive and dead last in time of possession allowed per drive. So the Cardinals defense, yes, has done some good things, but what have they not done well is get off the field and the opposing offenses have had opportunities to extend drives. You need to take advantage of that.
Yeah, and I think, look, about this seems like the value of the run game, but I want to get more specific in this particular matchup. And I love what you pointed out with attacking the middle of the field, because I do think that Arizona's linebackers, Mac Wilson's been okay in coverage, but Kaiser White has been vulnerable. He was vulnerable last year. That is an area that has never been a strength in his game since he came into the NFL. And Seattle's got weapons that they can attack the middle of the field with. The Commanders had success doing that when they blew out the Cardinals earlier this year. They were able to take advantage of those linebackers and some of their deficiencies in coverage as well. But I also look at Arizona, the way they play run defense, it's a little different than what the Seahawks do in terms of how they do their run fits. They are the attack, get downhill right now, just plug the gap. And look, that can work really well when you are ticking on all cylinders. And let's be honest, there's been times in which the Seahawks would be able to do that. But teams that are that aggressive, particularly with their linebackers, their second-level players, there's going to be blitzes. Arizona likes to blitz a lot. The run game, one of the ways that I feel like you can attack this Cardinals defense with the mindset that they had, the fact they do send guys second and third level a lot. I try to create some mismatches in terms of gap fits with the gap run game. And I know that this has been kind of hit and miss for the Seahawks this year, but I'm mixing in some power, some trap. I'm mixing in some counters, and I'm attacking an aggressive defense and seeing if I can take advantage of that aggressiveness and use it against them a little bit by opening up some gaps that maybe are not going to be accounted for, getting some cutback lanes that are in there. I think the gap run game is going to be huge for the Seahawks here. And that's not saying you can't run zone concepts either, but I actually think the gap run game against this team, I think you can neutralize their blitzing a little bit, and you might be able to force their schematic hand a little bit if you're able to find success running the ball with some of those power, counter, trap schemes. The gap schemes, I think, will be valuable for the Seahawks to be able to win this football game. Let's transition to the defensive side now. And every time you play Arizona, look, priority one's got to be keeping the jitterbug that is Kyler Murray in the pocket. And not to say that he's Lamar Jackson, because I think Lamar Jackson is one of one. But I think if you're looking at whoever that next tier is for dangerous quarterbacks when they get the ball outside the pocket or they cut up in the pocket and then they decide to take off, Kyler Murray is in that next group in terms of being extremely dangerous. He's averaging 8.1 yards per carry this year, Nick. He has been absolutely dynamite. He only had 3 carries in their last game against the Jets. He scored 2 touchdowns. So he is an incredibly efficient runner when it comes to creating scoring opportunities as well. The Seahawks, knock on wood, last 3 or 4 times they've played Arizona that Murray's been in the lineup, they have done a pretty good job of bottling him up. And if you can get that interior pass rush on him and you contain the edge with his height, that can be an issue for him. Can you muddy up those passing lanes where he can't see or he can't get the ball over the top, but you don't allow him to tuck and run, find creases, then take off and rip you in the run game? The Seahawks had issues with Brock Purdy doing that last week. Kyler Murray is a totally different style athlete than Brock Purdy. No offense to Brock Purdy, but this is, to me, key number 1, 2, and 3 for the Seahawks to win this game. You cannot let Kyler Murray run the football effectively, and you can't let him extend plays getting outside of the pocket where his tight end, Trey McBride, and his receivers then can burn you.
Yeah, you want to be able to contain him and do it smartly, of course. He had 2 rushing touchdowns against the Jets 2 weeks ago before their bye. I like the matchup with Ernest Jones. I'll get to that in a second, too. Ernest Jones, I think, is up to the task there. Also, my thing, James Conner is one of the more underrated running backs in the NFL, in my opinion. Yep. You got to treat him like Christian McCaffrey. I mean, yes, he's not. I'm not saying he is Christian McCaffrey, but he has the same ability and same usage. He's 11th in the entire NFL in scrimmage yards. They use him all over the place. Had 80 receiving yards against the Jets. He can kind of hurt you in a bunch of different ways. So while the Seahawks didn't necessarily completely bottle up Christian McCaffrey, totally, I thought they did a decent job and kind of treating James Conner with the same type of intensity because he is a very talented running back. He is really, in my opinion, top 6, top 7 at worst running back in the NFL, James Conner. So treating him with the same way that they attacked Christian McCaffrey, giving him the respect in the passing game as well, because he could definitely hurt you. And also, being smart about all that, with the run fits, the blitzes. The Seahawks have been doing a lot better with that. So, they allowed 68 rushing yards to the Rams in week 9 and 131, but their longest run was the Brock Purdy scramble for 13 yards. I think was their longest run. So lately, ever since that Bills debacle, the Seahawks have been a lot better at containing the run, and this will be another very important game. The Cardinals are second in the NFL in yards per carry with Kyler Murray and Connor, and also Trey Benson. Trey Benson. I get the Treys mixed up. Those guys are lethal, and you got to be smart. You got to be in your gaps and sound.
Speaking of being smart, you mentioned blitzing. This is one of those games, and I will say this anytime you play a quarterback like Lamar Jackson or Kyler Murray. Listen, you better blitz at your own peril. And I'm not saying that you can't send extra rushers ever, because I think there are ways that you can do that creatively that can work. But this cannot be a game where that is a big part of your game plan. And the reason why is because, and it stunts as well. Stunts work beautifully when executed properly. But the problem is they can be slow developing. And oh, by the way, they can lead to massive creases that open up at the line of scrimmage. And with a quarterback like Kyler Murray, that can be problematic. All he's got to do is tuck and run, and he's gone for 40 yards if you create that space. And if you blitz, you send 5+ rushers against Kyler Murray. And listen, I don't count the 5-man fronts. Like if they're in bear fronts, that to me is still a base non-blitz rush. But if they're sending 5 with a linebacker or a corner or safety coming after Kyler Murray, whoever's getting the blitz there, you better get to Kyler Murray, because if you don't, that is going to create more opportunities for him to tuck and run, and he could step out in the pocket and burn you with one less guy back in pass coverage. So again, I'm not saying you can't blitz at all, but this would be a game that I would be very hesitant to be aggressive, and that I would have softer pass rushes on the outside to try to prevent Kyler Murray from being able to step up and replace those guys off the edge. I'd be having those soft edge contains where you want to be aggressive, but at the same time, look, if we can power pin him inside and we can get to him, that's one thing, but you cannot let Kyler Murray escape, and you can't blitz him too often. I think that would create some significant issues for the Seahawks. If this game boils down to they have to do that to get pressure, that could end up being a bad omen on a number of fronts. When we come back, we've got our weekly picks to click and game predictions here. You're listening to the Blue Friday edition of the Locked On Seahawks podcast. Okay, real talk. We've all been there, feeling like we're burning cash with those rent checks. It's frustrating, right? But here's the deal. Built Rewards has figured out a way to make rent more rewarding. Say goodbye to the money bonfire and hello to a renter's revolution with Built. Built is breaking ground as a neighborhood rewards program that hooks you up with points on your rent. Every month you pay your rent and watch the Built points roll in. Use points to jet off on a dream vacation. 500 plus airlines, 700,000 plus hotels and properties at your disposal to use your points on. You can also use your points to book fitness studio classes, redeem them towards a future rent payment. They're designed to meet your lifestyle. Pay rent hassle-free through the Built Rewards app. Your rent game just got a major upgrade. Built points have been consistently ranked the highest value point currency by the Points Guy and Bankrate. Earn points by paying rent right now when you go to join built.com/LockedOnNFL. That's JOINBILT.com/LockedOnNFL. Make sure to use our URL so they know we sent you. Join built.com/LockedOnNFL to start earning points with your rent payments today. Welcome back to the Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined by my co-host Nick Lee. And a special thanks to all the 12s tuning in. Thank you as always for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. The Seahawks with a mega matchup coming up on Sunday against the Arizona Cardinals at Lumen Field. First place in the line. If the Cardinals win, they just extend their advantage in the division. If the Seahawks win, they leapfrog Arizona and move into first place in the division. Crazy to think a couple weeks ago, there were a lot of people thinking the season's over, but that win against the San Francisco 49ers, Nick, it completely changed everything. Now, obviously, if you lose this game, you fall to 5-6, that peril starts to come back into play a little bit. But at the same time, it's a division that is so tight. All these teams nestled together, and Seattle's got a chance to climb back to the top. Let's get to our weekly picks to click. And Nick, we're going to ramp up the thing a little bit this week. Rather than just picking a player, we're going to dish out some projections as well. And let's start on the offensive side of the football. Who is your pick to click going into this game against the Arizona Cardinals?
Well, when we start rolling out stats, you might think I'll be picking someone for a 100-yard rushing game. 100-yard. I am taking Charles Cross, the left tackle, for 2 receiving touchdowns. No, I'm going to go with Charles Cross in getting 1 pressure allowed or less, 1 or 0, with 0 sacks allowed. He has 3 games this year with 1 pressure allowed or 0. And I like the matchup. The Cardinals aren't crazy good with rushing the passer. They don't have it like an alpha pass rusher. And so Charles Cross, I like that matchup. He's rounding into form. In fact, consider me his campaign manager to become a Pro Bowl left tackle this year. In fact, I might be so much his campaign manager, he might make me chief of staff afterwards. I don't know. But, he's on that trajectory. He was 5th in overall Pro Football Focus grade as a left tackle. He's 3rd in run blocking, only one of 6 left tackles with 2 or less sacks allowed with 600 snaps. So he's right up in there with one of the better tackles in the game. So I'm expecting a nice a game from Cross, maybe a quiet game, I think is what we're really going for.
Yeah, when you're talking about offensive linemen, you want the quiet game. You don't want to have to, watching former Seahawk Jermaine Ifedi last night in that snow game, you don't want to be like, oh, there's Jermaine Ifedi. That's the guy I remember giving up sacks or having false start penalties. I think he had both of them in a very short span last night. But the point is, you don't want announcers calling out a guy for an offensive line unless it's like a pancake or something. You really would prefer to be quiet because that means, doing a good job neutralizing things. All this talk about Jackson Smith and Jigba is warranted, the way that he's played. And I think he could have another big game against the Arizona Cardinals on Sunday. But don't forget about DK Metcalf. This will be his 2nd game since he returned from a knee sprain. He looked healthy last weekend, made some big catches in that contest. Obviously didn't lead the team in receptions, receiving yards. That went to JSN. But DK Metcalf historically has had some big games against the Arizona Cardinals. And as well as this defense has played, only 11 touchdowns through the air given up in 10 games, they have been vulnerable to big plays. And this feels like a matchup where they're going to be dealing with maybe the best receiving core they have faced the entire season. A healthy DK Metcalf, JSN, Tyler Lockett. I just have a feeling we're going to see DK have one of his better games of the season. In fact, I'm going to say that he gets to 9 receptions, 108 receiving yards. And I think Geno Smith finds him not once, but twice in the end zone. I think DK has a big game at home for the Seahawks against this Cardinals secondary. Let's go to the defensive side of the football now. Our defensive side game picks to click. And Nick, listen, there's several candidates for this, but I know there's one player in particular that you just feel like you got to keep rolling with at this point.
I mean, he's rolling, and that's Ernest Jones. Birthday boy, in fact, on this Friday. Ernest Jones, a linebacker, happy 25th birthday. 37 tackles in 3 games. He's just been a machine. I think it was someone, I read an article where he called him a vacuum cleaner. I mean, really, that's what he's been. And he has the skill set, I think, necessary to handle Kyler Murray in space if that's needed. He's just that dude. And I'm expecting another big game from him, the vacuum cleaner. I'm going to go 12 tackles, and he gets his first sack as a Seahawk, whether on a blitz or, he's kind of green dogging it with Kyler Murray, where he's either covering a halfback and he is in pass pro, so he kind of is free to blitz and gets his first sack as a Seahawks. So Ernest Jones, I mean, keep it rolling. He's about I think he's almost just as hot as JSN is on offense. He's been a revelation on defense. Just talk about a turn of events at linebacker. Ernest Jones, I'm expecting yet another big game.
I'm going to go to the edge group because this is a game where, and I mentioned this in the second segment, where you got to be somewhat guarded when you're rushing Kyler Murray because you don't want to get too deep upfield. And Derek Hall, with his style, I actually think this could be a game where his skill set fits well because I think when he's at his best, it's when he is turning speed to power and he's collapsing down in the pocket. Those kind of rushers are the ones that tend to have the most success against mobile quarterbacks like Kyler Murray because you're not going to get too far upfield. You are going to be using that power to collapse the pocket rather than getting downfield. And I think that that's going to be able to create some issues for Murray where he's not going to be able to get outside. And now suddenly you've got Derek Hall and whoever's blocking him or trying to block him in your lap. And I just think the effort player that Derek Hall is, I would not be shocked if he gets a sack in this game chasing down Kyler Murray from behind because that's just the way that he plays with his hair on fire. It's been a while since dominant game from Hall. He did have a sack last week, even though I didn't necessarily consider that a sack. It was more of Brock Purdy tripping himself up, but they had to give somebody the sack there. I think Derek Hall gets a legit sack in this game. I think he gets a couple of quarterback hits, and I'm going to say a strip sack in there. I think that this is a game. Kyler Murray can be loose to the football. I think that they get a turnover that way with Derek Hall getting after the quarterback. All right, Nick, it's time for game predictions. Let's get to them here. Our first game prediction coming from you, good sir. I know that you have not been high on the Seahawks as of late, very rarely picking them to win games. Do you think they get back to first place in the NFC West, or are the Arizona Cardinals a little too much and a little too hot coming into this game?
Man, I really like the return of Abe Lucas and stabilizing the offensive line a little bit. And I kind of see him as his return and hopefully to full health, kind of like at the end of Endgame when it's just Captain America versus everybody. And all of a sudden here comes the Black Panther with his Wakandan Royal Guard. And they're just coming and making a charge there against Thanos. That's kind of how I feel that Abe Lucas, right when it was darkest, here he is. And, and they got to knock it off with this losing streak at home, right? They can't let that get to 5. And, weekend before Thanksgiving, season's been rejuvenated after that win. Seems like momentum's kind of shifting a little bit. Cardinals are definitely feisty, and I've been terrified about this matchup all season long. I fully expect this to be a rock fight down to the very end. In fact, Corbin, I am calling this an overtime game. I think this game is going to get that close, that down to the nitty-gritty, and I could see this being an overtime game. Seahawks and Cardinals have had some weird overtime games in the past, and I could see this being that way. But as I've seen in the live chat, Jason Myers, give that guy some love, and I can see him winning the game in the end in overtime. Give me 23-20 Seahawks in an absolute rock fight, battle to the death in the NFC West. But Seahawks come out on top finally at home in overtime.
When I look at what transpired last weekend, I know that the Seahawks only scored 20 points, and they didn't score a touchdown in that game until Nick Bosa exited the game. Like, I know there were some factors there to consider, but listen, this was that giant that the Seahawks could not slay the last 3 years, and they finally were able to do it. And I look particularly at Geno Smith with that rushing touchdown and the emotion there, chucking the ball into the tunnel. I mean, he could say whatever he wants. This was not just another win to Geno. So yeah, the Steph Curry sleep signal to the fans. I mean, this was not another win to Geno Smith, whether that's what he's going to say or not publicly. I know that this game meant a lot more to him, but I think that last drive, willing the team to finally slay the demon that is the San Francisco 49ers, I think we're going to see Geno Smith get on a hot streak coming into this next game. I think he is riding on high. There were some plays in that game that he wished he could have had back in San Francisco, but they're going back home. This is a Cardinals secondary that I think there's vulnerability that goes beyond the numbers we've seen. And I like Seattle's receivers matching up against them in the secondary. I think the offensive line can handle these guys as long as you can deal with the blitzes they're going to throw at you. And I'm comfortable with Oluwatimi doing that. With that being said, I'm going to say the Seahawks put up 30 points in this game. And look, the Cardinals defense have been great the last 2 games, but they gave up 41 earlier this year to the Washington Commanders. They have had several games. I mean, Green Bay lit them up. I think Seattle's offense is just as good, if not better, than what those teams are in terms of the skill players that they have. And I think the offensive line now rounding into form a little bit, getting Noah Fant back. I think Arizona keeps this game somewhat close because they do have really good weapons on offense themselves. They are the first place team. But I like the Seahawks in this matchup because I think Geno Smith is going to have the best game he's had all year throwing the football. In terms of touchdowns, I think he is going to get after the secondary. I think they're going to be able to run the ball a little bit. And so I think Seattle gets a 30-burger here on the Cardinals, and they move into first place in the NFC West. We will see how things go, but this is going to be one of the marquee matchups in a weekend where there, quite frankly, are not a lot of really exciting matchups in the NFL. This is one of the few marquee matchups worth watching with first place on the line. As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Nick at Nick Lee 51. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Coming up on Sunday, we've got our weekly post-game show. Hopefully, we'll be breaking down a Seahawks victory. Make sure you listen. That'll be a couple hours after the final whistle at Lumen Field. Enjoy the rest of your Friday. Enjoy the game on Sunday. Go Hawks.